Tonight to the My Horse University and E-Extension HorseQuest live webcast on the basics of planning and zoning for horse-friendly communities. Please note that you are able to ask questions throughout the presentation this evening via the chat feature on the left side of your screen, and we'll also have some time at the end of the presentation for additional questions as well. And at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Holly Groshek, who is from the Equine Land Conservation Resource, to give an introduction for our webinar this evening.
Thank you, Gwen. Equine Land Conservation Resource is happy to be here partnering with My Horse University and Extension's HorseQuest on this evening's webinar. For those of you who are not familiar with my organization, I'm having trouble screening down, so maybe you can do that for me, Gwen. Thank you. As you can see from the screen in front of you in our mission statement, ELCR is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that works primarily with equine-related organizations and individuals on local land issues. You can hit the next screen. The organization offers various unique online educational materials and resources that we provide free of charge to the equine community in 6 key core areas related to conserving land for horses and horse-related activities, which you can see right now on your screen. You can access material in these 6 core issues on our website resource library at www.elcr.org. Today's webcast will focus on the first core area listed on the screen, planning for horses in your community, which we feel is becoming increasingly more important to the equine community as it lies at the core of horse land conservation. One of our more recent online publications is a planning and zoning guide for horse-friendly communities. This will be a useful resource to support tonight's webcast. So I encourage you to go on our website and take a look at this publication. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you this evening's presenter, Christine Hughes. Christine is a senior planner with the City of Wilmington, North Carolina Planning, Development, and Transportation Department. She oversees the long-range environmental and Special Projects Unit and has worked extensively with community groups developing small area, corridor, and comprehensive plans. Prior to moving to Wilmington, Christine was a planner with Gwinnett County, Georgia, and a program coordinator at the University of Georgia. Christine is a member of the American Planning Association, the American Institute of Certified Planners, and more recently, the Equine Land Conservation Resource Advisory Council. And I'd like to mention that Christine is also the author of the publication I just mentioned, Planning and Zoning Guide for Horse-Friendly Communities. So Christine, if you're ready, I'd like to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'm glad to see so many people from across the country. I will say that planning and zoning varies greatly from state to state. So if you have a specific question about how things work in your state, I will do my best, but you may need to speak with a local planner just because the rules are so different across the country. To understand planning for some folks is really like trying to put together a puzzle with too many pieces. So tonight I'm going to try to help you put together some of the basics to understand what is planning, what is zoning. I'm going to talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan, a lot about zoning codes and maps, and how to get involved. And as we go through, I'm going to use the term local government to refer to various units of local government. So for you, that might be a city, a county, a township, or some other form of local government. So don't get confused if you don't have a county or a township or a city, but just keep in mind local governments of all sorts. And I hope that if you take one thing away from tonight's discussion, it's that you really want to get involved or at least stay informed about planning and zoning in your community, because there are so many pieces to this puzzle. A lot of planners are going to use acronyms and words that don't make sense to regular people. But if you don't stay involved, you definitely risk losing the very things that we as horse people need the most, and that's land and the ability to keep horses. So before we go any further, it's necessary to understand that planning and zoning aren't the same thing. We often hear planning and zoning lumped all together, and they do go hand in hand, but there are important differences between the two. And it's also important to know that a local government may engage in planning or zoning or both or neither. So you may be here tonight wondering why your local government doesn't have a comprehensive plan, and it might be because they just don't engage in planning at all. Planning and plans are policy oriented, not laws, and that's kind of the one thing to take away from what is planning. Plans help us coordinate decision making to achieve multiple goals. So you might think about how are we going to provide water and sewer to every household in our city while we keep growth from sprawling too far away from the center of town. Local governments may engage in planning at various scales, at a comprehensive level or a small area level, or they may not engage in planning at all. Whether they're doing a comprehensive plan or a small area plan, any good plan is community-based. That means there's a lot of input from citizens and the development of shared goals for the community going forward. And just out of curiosity, does anyone know what city that plan is for on the screen there? That is Oglethorpe's plan for the city of Savannah. So if planning is policy related, what is zoning? Zoning is the legal side of the toolbox. Zoning uses both an ordinance and a map to regulate land uses and development. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation tonight. Just like planning, not all local governments use zoning. Some local governments will zone a few parcels, but not all. Some will zone all parcels. It depends on how the state regulates zoning. So it's based on the local government's ability to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. And because of this, zoning very often relies on separating uses from one another. So incompatible uses, that is. For example, you may have a factory that produces lots of smoke, dust, and odors, and that may be deemed to be incompatible with, say, a residential neighborhood, and therefore the factory use would be in a separate zoning district from a residential use. Now, as I said earlier, plans are policy oriented and they're not laws or rules. So why bother writing plans in the first place? Well, as Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So let's talk a little bit about how local governments actually engage in planning. The comprehensive plan is a common tool for local governments to use, and in some states it's actually required of a local government. In North Carolina, where I live, a plan is not required, but local governments are authorized to engage in both planning and zoning. So in North Carolina, we see all scales of planning and zoning across the state, from all to nothing. I like to think of the comprehensive plan as an umbrella document. It's very wide-reaching in that it crosses all of the services and departments that a local government may provide, and it usually is supplemented by additional plans just because it is so wide-reaching. And they often have a very long timeline or planning horizon, sometimes up to 25 years. So because you have a long planning horizon, they're usually updated every 5 years or so, and because it is so wide-reaching, it's usually not a standalone document. So you'll have these comprehensive plans supplemented by small area plans or neighborhood plans or corridor plans or any other kind of smaller piece of the puzzle. The idea of creating a shared vision for the future of a community is the key to creating a comprehensive plan. Now keep in mind that these plans may be undertaken by a city or a county, or a city and a county together, or even a regional collaboration of governments. And you can imagine that the bigger the planning area it is, the more challenging the process can be, because you want all of your stakeholders to be involved in the planning process, to come together and hammer out what goals and visions for the community really are going forward. It's hard to sometimes focus on something like what our community is going to be like 25 years from now when you get wrapped up in the issues of the present day. You know, I need stormwater controls and I need a building permit for this or that. And so to step back and take the time as a community to focus on what's going to happen 10, 15, 20 years from now is really a valuable exercise. And these plans will typically have policies that address how, where, and why growth and development should occur in a community. And they're usually reinforced by some sort of growth strategies or land use map. Now, the land use map is really a key component of a comprehensive plan. It outlines the preferred land uses as the community grows, develops, and redevelops throughout that lifespan of the plan, which again can be up to 25 years. This map is usually color-coded to depict the preferred land uses and patterns that are consistent with the policies that are spelled out in the plan document. Rather than specific land uses or specific zoning classifications, the land use map may recommend the intensity or degree to which land should be developed in the future, or which areas should change and which areas should be more stable. So you may see a map laid out to spell out where land should remain rural and where land is okay to be developed. Or like in this map, you see a key redevelopment area in the center of the city, and then some other kind of satellite growth areas. So the land use map categories don't necessarily correspond to a zoning map. That's a different kind of map that we're going to hit on in just a moment, but they are related. A land use map is developed with a complete inventory of current land uses, but remember this map is thinking about future land uses and a way to help determine future development patterns and future land use changes rather than the current regulations or uses of land. And this map is really the key to understanding how the community envisions changing in the future. Now, it's not a guarantee, it's not a promise of change or how things are going to go, but it is a major piece of the decision-making puzzle when local governments are making land use and zoning choices. It's really critical to understand that this is the map that your local governing boards, so your city council, your county commissioners, or what have you, are going to look at when your neighbor wants to rezone his farm to allow single-family homes. The maps will vary from community to community, of course, and they're going to vary depending on the context of the area. So a very rural community is going to have a much different map than a very urban community, but both should address the transitions between urban land uses and rural areas. This map I would call more of a, that's on the screen, I would call more of a growth strategies map rather than a parcel specific future land use map. Now this map is from the city of Raleigh's, it's an excerpt from the city of Raleigh's future land use map. And you see that like a lot of communities, they actually went the route of identifying preferred future land uses for every parcel in the city. This is a very traditional approach. And if this is the route that your community has chosen, it's really important to think about making amendments to this map each time a rezoning is approved so that the rezoning or the zoning map and the future land use map are consistent. I personally prefer a more strategy-oriented map because as a planner, I really don't have a crystal ball and I can't predict the future. So a growth strategies-oriented map just gives a little bit more flexibility to accommodate changes in the future. So I think we have a poll question here. Maybe. Who knows what their property is zoned? And it's looking like a lot of you do. Okay, great. You know exactly what it's zoned. That's great. And if you don't know, those of you who said you think you know, I'll tell you how to find out what it's zoned. Land use regulations are adopted. Now remember, this is the legal piece of it. They're adopted in either a zoning code or a zoning ordinance. You may hear it called either one of those things. And it's made up, again, of both text and a map. Now these rules are codified local laws, and they may be part of a unified development ordinance, which is sometimes called a UDO, or it could just be a small chapter inside of the general code of ordinances for your local government. Now to use zoning, a local government divides the jurisdiction into zoning districts and regulates the development of land and buildings within these districts. The code is a document that spells out the specific development regulations for all of the parcels that are zoned a certain way. So you can have multiple zoning districts, but everything inside a single zoning district has to be treated the same as all the other properties inside that district. And you'll find inside of the code that there are regulations relative to what you can do with land and buildings. That's the land use. The allowable density, which is usually thought of in terms of dwelling units per acre. Building and site design, floor area ratio, parking requirements, setbacks, which is the distance that a building needs to be placed from the property line. It may cover how much land area can be covered by the building footprint and how much of the parcel has to remain open or landscaped. We call that lot coverage. So like I said, each zoning district can have different regulations, but each property within a single zoning district has to have the same rules applied to it as all the other parcels in that district. So if your property is zoned agricultural, then you have the same rules applied to your property as all the other parcels in your community with that same zoning district. Many codes will also outline uses that are permitted by right, which just means that if you want to do something that's permitted by right, you don't have to get any special entitlements to go through with doing that use. You may still need to get a building permit or what have you, but there are no special zoning permissions needed. Some codes are also going to have special uses or conditional uses, and those uses may require some sort of additional review or permit, either by your planning staff or by a city council or a planning commission or some sort of board or body. This is the document, the zoning ordinance, where you'll find information about permitted uses, building heights, required parking, setbacks, all of those other development regulations. And every zoning code is organized in a different way, unique to each community, but it's very common to find a table of uses which will spell out which uses are permitted in each zoning district and how they are permitted either by right or with any kind of special permissions required. There are other types of zoning codes that are becoming more common and that rely less on separation of uses. These are more typical in urbanized areas. They're not very common, usually in more rural areas, but the idea of zoning and zoning practice is really evolving with population trends and preferences. Now, all of that said about the zoning code, what is important to look for in terms of a horse-friendly zoning code? And these are just a few tips, things to look for. A horse-friendly zoning code should include at least one agricultural zoning district with a large minimum lot area. Okay, it makes sense that if you're going to be keeping horses or livestock on your property that you need to have a lot of land area. You'll want to look for appropriate buffering requirements when commercial or residential land uses are abutting agricultural uses. And sometimes you may find that even when you're there first, as a rural or agricultural use, an incompatible land use comes in next to you, and they may not actually be required to put in any buffering, but I like to say good buffers make good neighbors, so that may be something that you want to look for. You want to look for flexible horse density standards. That's how many horses per acre you can have or how many animals per acre you can have on the property. Flexible setback regulations for barns and accessory structures. Appropriate definitions for horse and livestock. And always you want to make sure there's an option to appeal any zoning decisions to a board of adjustment or board of appeals. Now, the zoning map is also part of the zoning ordinance, and this map is the official zoning assignment for all the zone parcels within a jurisdiction. It's a visual representation of how the land within the jurisdiction is zoned. Some local governments will zone some, but not all of the land, while others will zone everything. This map can be changed, but it typically takes an official action from the governing body, and that's usually what you'll hear referred to as a rezoning. In most areas, you can find out what your community zoning map looks like online if you wanted to verify the zoning of your property, though you may need to actually call the planning office to find out. Not every place, not every city or community posts these online, and even some that do will tell you that the map you find online isn't the official zoning map, so you'll want to just verify that with your local planner. Once you've found your property on the zoning map to identify what it's zoned, you next want to go back to the zoning ordinance to determine what the rules for that zoning district are and see how horse-friendly the zoning for your property is. Now, zoning map is a great tool for helping you make decisions. When you look at the zoning map, you're going to want to find your property, but also the zoning for the properties around you. You know, maybe the west side of your property is bounded by a farm now, but it's actually zoned for single-family residential. That might influence your decision as to where you locate your new barn or how you lay out your property. It's also especially helpful when you're making decisions about purchasing property. You may find a property that you really like, and so you'll want to check the zoning of that property and also the zoning of the land around it to make sure it's compatible with your plans. And just remember that the actual zoning of the property may not match up with the current use. Like I said, your neighbor's property might be in use as a horse farm today, but the zoning on the map actually allows for 10 single-family houses to the acre. So that there is a potential for a little bit of conflict there. You know, it just depends on when the local government actually put the zoning in place, and sometimes local governments will just follow the existing land uses to zone the property, and sometimes they don't. So that potential for conflict exists. So just make sure that you understand what your property is zoned and also what the zoning is around yours. So now you know all of the basics. So what? First, so what? If you don't know your zoning for your property, go online or call your local planning office and find out. Call your planning office and find out if your community has any plans in place that affect your property, or are there new plans coming up? And if so, how can you get involved with them? You may also see or hear about other actions, maybe a subdivision or an appeals hearing or some sort of special use permit request. And your local planning office can definitely walk you through all of those processes. When you call the planning office and talk to your local planner, where do you start? You're going to want to ask questions related to your equine land, such as, of course, whether or not they use zoning and what your property is zoned, including those around you. What restrictions exist related to where horses and barns can be located on the property? Are there any horse density standards? How can you change the zoning of your property? And how can you stay informed about potential changes to the zoning map in your area? And this is a key point. Several of you said when you joined this evening that you live in areas where there's a lot of growth occurring, and so potentially some land use conflicts going on. So that's a good question you're going to want to ask. How do you stay informed about these zoning changes in the area? Some local governments will have a listserv that you can sign up for, or just post things on their website regularly with potential zoning changes that are coming to your area. I know the local government I work for requires that we place a legal ad in the newspaper, and it's one of those tiny fine print ads that you couldn't find if you were looking for it, if you tried. So I always recommend people check the website. We also post signs on the property, which is a pretty common thing to do. So you may see a sign posted on a property with maybe a case number on it, or it may just say rezoning. You'll definitely want to call the planning office and find out about those. Your local planner can be really a great resource for you. They can answer all of your questions and talk you through the process of changing your own zoning, what your neighbors' plans are if they've filed a rezoning request. They can talk you through how to go through an appeals process, how to get permits that you may need, and how to get any building or site plans approved. They can also help you with what else may be required beyond the zoning basics. Maybe you need a stormwater permit, or there are some relevant state regulations in your area. And so your local planner will be a great resource to how to figure out those kinds of needs. Now, your planning staff, I will say, is usually going to have a lot of information, but actually very little decision-making authority. So they probably are not going to be able to change the zoning. And sometimes they're not even going to be able to issue permits for you because they may require approval by a board or commission or some such thing, but they will definitely be able to walk you through all of the processes. So I think we have another poll question here. This is an important one. Would you describe your community as urban, rural, or somewhere in between? And I see somebody has just chimed in that Michigan requires first-class mail notice to all property owners, occupants within 300 feet of a rezoning or special use permit. And that's a pretty common requirement, although it is really going to vary from place to place. In North Carolina, for example, there is no standard requirement beyond adjacent property owners. Now, some local governments have taken that to 1,000 feet or 500 feet or 100 feet of mail notice, but that's not standard. So it's very convenient to have that in place because that really is a good way to help get word out about zoning changes. Okay, so looks like about half of you said you're somewhere in between, and you're going to be the kind of the group that I'm talking to most closely here. So let's talk about the comp plan a little bit, the comprehensive plan. It's going to be full of policies that inform important decisions about your community, and so it's really important to be a part of it for a lot of reasons. First of all, you need to share your ideas with your planners, with your decision makers, and with your neighbors. And you may actually find yourself in a position to need to educate your planners and your decision makers about your needs as horsemen. If you live in Lexington or Aiken or Wellington, you probably will have a planner on staff who knows a thing or two about horses, and probably someone on your city council or your county commission who already knows what you're talking about. But if you live in Charlotte or Boston or Portland, you may not find that person. So you may find yourself really needing to educate folks on what your needs are. It's also really important to come together with your neighbors to build consensus on how to reach your goals for the future of your community. So you may find that your neighbors and you are all on the same page. You want to protect the rural character of your community going forward. Or you may find that some of your neighbors are ready to sell the farm and make some money and move on. So it's really important to come together and work out what your shared vision is and build those networks. So you might think if you live in a rural area that it really doesn't matter much what happens in the city nearby. And if you live in a city, you may think it really doesn't matter what happens in the surrounding rural lands. But urban and rural are linked in really important ways. And to me, this is the really critical part of the planning process, most especially for those of you who said you live somewhere in between urban and rural. And honestly, that's where a lot of us are now, somewhere in between urban and rural. There aren't clear lines like there used to be so much anymore. Think about what's really happening in this picture. Rural land is being converted into suburban development. This is one of the greatest pressures that causes the loss of horse lands. It usually happens because policies and regulations make it quicker, easier, and cheaper to build on open land, what we call greenfields, rather than to build on an already developed area or to redevelop buildings and sites or infill on small vacant lots in more developed areas. So that's sort of at the core of the heart of the issue. How do we stop this from happening? Of course, I'm going to say we start with the comprehensive plan. Policies should be reinforced that limit sprawl, that incentivize infill and redevelopment, and keep rural lands for rural or agricultural uses. So what sort of regulations encourage greenfield development? Well, first of all, we develop codes. A lot of cities develop zoning codes at the height of the suburban boom. So think about what was happening after World War II. We had a population boom. People were now owning cars. They could easily live outside of the city and drive in for work. And a lot of cities, that's when they adopted zoning, and that's when they wrote their zoning codes. And so we have these zoning codes that really encourage and even inadvertently subsidize sprawling development. They do this by limiting housing density. They have low or limited building heights. They require a lot of land to be allocated for unusable space, like deep setbacks and parking. And parking is one of my personal pet peeves. You can see here this Target picture was, we have these in communities across the country, just these huge parking lots, and it's essentially wasted land. Well, now you've got all this land dedicated to parking that can't be used for anything more productive or efficient. So it's going to be cheaper to go, buy the farm and develop it for housing needs. Other policies that or codes that impact or encourage greenfield development are inappropriate or lacking impact fee structures. And those are the fees that developers pay to connect to water and sewer or to install new roadway infrastructure, those sort of things. School siting policies that require single-level buildings in vast amounts of land. Anyone who lives near a contemporary school can probably tell you that there's a lot of traffic queuing up in the morning and in the afternoon, and there are schools on these huge sites that really require new schools to have to move far out of the city center in order to be built. And then, of course, that strict separation of uses is going to be a major component of encouraging greenfield development. So whereas rural agriculture and undeveloped land are known as greenfields, already developed land, maybe you may hear it called gray fields, or even brownfields, which brownfields is a really specific term to refer to land that is actually contaminated or may have been contaminated. So I will talk in terms of infill and redevelopment in terms of redeveloping cities and already built areas. So policies that support infill and redevelopment, regulatory codes can be structured to support infill and redevelopment and actually put it on even footing with greenfield development, and that can really help discourage sprawl and really help to alleviate development pressures on agricultural land. And we do this by allowing mixed-use buildings and mixed-use development. You know, the town center concept is very popular today, and that's one way to integrate uses that can keep things kind of contained nearer to the city centers. Allowing greater density and greater building heights is very important. Modifying our open space, parking, and setback requirements. So we're not dedicating a lot of land to essentially useless needs, or not, they're not useless, but they're underserving. Impact fees that relate directly to the cost of providing community services. So you are actually paying more directly related to the impact that you're having. If it's going to cost more to get the children on the school bus and to have the mail delivered and to run water and sewer lines and to run, you know, extra miles of sidewalk and extra miles of roadway because you've chosen to build in a greenfield area, then you can offset that with impact fees that are more directly related to the actual cost of providing those services, rather than just saying, you know, 10 dwelling units requires a $100 impact fee. You can actually tie the impact fees to how much infrastructure is needed. Now, it's important to say here that not every community can or does or will use impact fees, so that may not be an option where you live. And it's also really important to think about reuse of older buildings that may not conform to contemporary building or zoning codes. That's a big way that we can encourage infill and redevelopment. Okay, so if equine land preservation, protection, and conservation is a concern, which I'm sure you're all here because it is, some of the things that you're going to want to ask about. So yes, I see in Michigan impact fees are not authorized, and that's not an uncommon situation. A lot of communities can't use impact fees. So thinking about conservation, if you can't use impact fees, what are you going to do? Let's talk about anti-sprawl policies. What kind of anti-sprawl policies are going into the comprehensive plan? Is there going to be an urban services boundary where we kind of say, hey, beyond this point, we're not going to extend things like water and sewer because we want to contain our growth inside of this boundary? Are we going to add some agricultural zoning tools? How is farmland protection going to be prioritized? And how will the plan relate rural areas to urban centers? And that is so important. You cannot go forward thinking that urban and rural don't have to talk to each other, because they absolutely do. All right, so questions we want to ask our planners about horses and horse keeping. What are the proposed definitions for horses and livestock? Is there a minimum acreage requirement or horse density requirement for keeping horses and livestock? If adequate access to land for public recreation is a concern in your community, you're going to want to ask where the horse-friendly parks, trails, and facilities are being proposed. You're going to want to ask if there's an opportunity for public access to some private land for recreational use. So getting through these questions at the beginning of the comprehensive planning process is really going to help you end up with policies and eventually codes and ordinances that support your needs as horsemen. If environmental concerns are a big issue for your community, you're going to want to ask, if there's chronic flooding or surface water contamination, you're going to want to ask about what plans exist for regional stormwater facilities. Are there any plans for regional composting facilities? What kind of plans are we going to make for the preservation of open space? And if you live in an area with a lot of wetlands, you might want to ask about wetlands restoration as well. Remember, plans are policies. They're not laws, so you may not realize immediate effects of a newly adopted plan. Plans have a long lifetime, so you don't think that you totally missed your chance if your community adopted a comp plan a few years ago. They're likely to be updated. If you're in a community that already has a plan, ask when it's going to be updated so that you can become involved with the update. Ask if there's a small area plan going on that you can become involved with. Because these are umbrella plans, comprehensive plans are supplemented by small area plans, issue-specific plans, and what I mean by that is perhaps there's a regional stormwater plan for your area, some specific issue. Find out if your neighborhood is part of a small area plan or if there's an open space or conservation plan that may be relevant. And remember, because these are not laws, there's not likely to be true enforcement of the policies like there is with zoning. So you can't call somebody up and say, hey, my neighbor's doing something inconsistent with a comprehensive plan. Can you get somebody out here? It doesn't quite work that way. So how will you know then if the plans are being followed? The primary way that you are going to know if the plans are being followed is through rezoning actions and other land use decisions on behalf of your local government. Zoning and land use actions ideally are going to be consistent with the plans that they've adopted. Now, in some states, consistency between the zoning map and the comprehensive plan is actually required. So you may see that someone comes in for a rezoning request, and they're also going to come in with a plan amendment request. In other places, there is no consistency requirement, so it will be up to you, the community, and also to your planning staff to ensure that land use decisions and capital spending plans are consistent with the comprehensive plan. So in summary, it's important to understand what your property is zoned and what, if any, plans are adopted that cover your property or plans that are on the horizon. If your community is going through a comprehensive or small area planning process, it's important to get involved because community planning can make for happy horses, happy neighbors, and happy horsemen. And I see that there are a couple questions popping in. How do you get horse owners to know how important it is for them to be involved on the front side of these discussions? That's a great question. And really, it's going to be about building your networks and sharing information. Usually, it's really easy to get folks to rally around a problem, right? So if you have a flooding problem in your community, or you have a constant problem with maybe your sewer pipes are bad or something, and it's a constant problem, well, it's really easy to get people to rally around something bad happening. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because you can totally tap into that network and you can try to turn that situation into a positive and say, look, let's think about how we can be proactive going forward so that we don't find ourselves in the same situation again. But it really is, it's important to be in touch with your planners and be in touch with your neighbors and be in touch with your network. If you're a member of a horseman's organization, really utilize that network and talk about what you can do to organize going forward. Do zoning or conservation plans dictate manure disposal practices, composting, transport? Probably not is the answer to that question. So really when you write a plan, the plan is going to be very policy oriented. So you may have a policy that says that your government should engage in responsible manure disposal practices or some such thing. You may have a zoning prohibition on where you can store manure on your property, and that's going to come down to a local government decision. So you'll want to check, Dan, with your local zoning code about whether that is in the code or not, but I'm going to say probably not. Okay, so I see here in Texas, a city may adopt a comprehensive plan, but if you don't adopt the plan, you cannot enforce zoning. So that's one way that we see consistency come about. I know in Georgia, they don't require a comprehensive plan either, but your city isn't eligible for any state funding if you haven't adopted a comp plan. So there are various ways that you can make these things come to fruition. Okay, I'm just reading the questions here. In my North Carolina community, zoning of previously unzoned land is being developed. The agricultural community is rapidly anti-zoning on principle. I disagree and think zoning protects my farm. Any ideas on how to diffuse this? Well, zoning is absolutely going to protect your farm. And I'm guessing if you have previously unzoned land, you're in a relatively rural area. So what you're probably going to want to do is again, join in your network and educate them on what zoning is and how it can protect your farm. Now, if you're seeing a lot of folks who really aren't interested in protecting agricultural lands, you're going to have a little bit more of an uphill battle with that. But build that network, find out what kind of zoning is proposed and what's allowed in those zoning districts and how that will really impact you. But really, it's so much about getting the information out there. A lot of what happens related to zoning actions is about confusion. People don't really understand what the rules are, what someone is proposing to do. So again, build a network, find out what's actually being proposed and how it's going to affect you. And sometimes if people just understand, hey, this might even protect my land from development, or it might even actually give me some sort of tax break or something like that because of the zoning, that can be one way to kind of put a positive spin on that. Is there a legal way to protect trails that have been on private property but used by the public for years? Unfortunately, probably not, unless the property owner chooses to donate an easement or somehow convey those for public use, then probably not. There are a lot of property owners who will allow private use of public use of their land for recreation, and unfortunately, when they decide to stop allowing that to happen, they can just stop allowing it to happen. So I think, okay, so Ronald is telling us that in California, yes, there have been some ways to do that. So definitely want to check then with your with a land use professional in your community about that issue. California is sort of an anomaly in the planning world because they have a lot of regulations that just don't carry over to a lot of other states. And I will tell you, I am not an expert on how things are done in California. So I think, did I miss anyone's question? I see there are some questions about picking up manure and that sort of thing, and a lot of times it really just comes down to being a good neighbor, and you can't regulate good behavior. We all want good neighbors, but we don't always get them. I think we have time for a few more questions, Gwen, Holly.
Yes, if there's a few more questions out there, go ahead and the participants here can feel free to go ahead and ask.
Okay, so Kurt's telling us that in the Michigan Right to Farm Act preempts some local regulation in many aspects of agriculture, and that's something you're definitely going to want to check with. And every state does zoning differently. There's not a hard and fast rule across the board about what a city or a local government can and cannot do. It's going to depend on a lot of things like your state constitution, your state enabling legislation for planning and zoning, and then any other kind of, for this example, Right to Farm Act. I know North Carolina is a Dillon's Rule state, so a local government can only do something that the state has allowed a local government to do. So it's really going to vary from state to state. And that's why I say become friends with your local planner. They're really going to help you work through a lot of these details. Okay, I'm on a planning board and have horses. Do you have examples of current zoning in use around the state and in small townships? Yes, actually we do. If you check out the guide that Holly mentioned at the beginning of the webcast, there are some good examples in the guide of local governments with great zoning and with great plans. Do you have any advice on balancing trail use between equestrians, hikers, and bicyclists? That is a great question. And in fact, it's actually an issue for me personally, how to balance that. And no, I'm sorry, I don't have any really great advice. You know, the quad riders and the dirt bike riders love the same trails that we love as equestrians, for good reason. You know, they like them for the same reasons that we do. You know, maybe there's a way that your local government can work out some sort of schedule. I've actually seen a local government do this here in North Carolina. I live at the beach, and one of our beach towns actually has a surfing schedule in place. And so surfers are allowed to use certain parts of the beach on certain days of the week. And, you know, it's the same with, you can bring your dogs only on certain days, and you can ride on the beach only on certain days. So it's definitely an option for a local government to sort of adopt some sort of schedule for how recreational land can be used. Do you have any ideas on how to establish cluster developments? I'd like to work on establishing one for equestrian use in Kentucky. Yeah, so cluster developments are a great option for, it's sort of a win-win option for giving a developer the highest density that he can get on the land in terms of number of housing units, but also protecting open space. And so you'll see a lot of cluster developments are very popular for you know, horse communities. Sometimes you'll even see them, people who want to have, you know, a neighborhood that will have actually like an airstrip, a landing strip. So that's a great tool. It is addressed in the guide, and I'd be happy to go into a little bit more detail with you about what cluster developments are offline, because it's kind of a lot of detail in that. Any other final thoughts or questions? Well, thank you so much for joining the webcast tonight. I've enjoyed being here with you. I hope that you found it useful. And like I said, I'd be glad to talk a little bit about more cluster regulations if you're interested.
All right, well, we'd definitely like to thank Christine and Holly and everyone at the Equine Land Conservation Resource for being a part of this presentation tonight. And of course, we'd like to thank all of the participants this evening as well. The discussion has been great, and we always really appreciate that. We would like some feedback from all of you on our webcast. You will receive an invitation from us tomorrow with an invitation to participate in our online survey about the webcast tonight. And I've also have a link right here on the page, and I'm going to post the link as well right here in the chat. There you go. So if you could go ahead, and it's just a few questions, and if you could take a few minutes to give us your feedback, we would really appreciate it. Also, we'd like to note couple of our upcoming webcasts. Our April webcast is coming up on April 28th, and our speaker is Fernanda Camargo from the University of Kentucky, and she's going to be talking about spring health, so parasites and vaccinations. And then, excuse me, our May webinar is going to be facilitated by Dr. Betsy Green from the University of Vermont, and Betsy's actually participating in our webcast tonight. She's kind of has been in our chat here this evening, and she's going to be speaking about tips for staying safe on the roads and trails. So looking forward to that here in May. And then, of course, we'll take the summer months off, so we will not be having any webinars in June, July, and August. So, of course, we'd also like you to become fans on our Facebook page. We always post a lot of up-to-date information in there about our events and promotions and things like that. And also, please remember that this webcast was recorded, and we'll be uploading it to our website. And as requested by Doug a little bit earlier in this webcast, we'll be adding some of the links that were discussed this evening as well to that webpage. So make sure to send any of your comments or questions to info@myhorseuniversity.com, and also make sure to check out E-Extension Horses, and the URL is here on the page as well for great articles and learning lessons and things like that. So we'll kind of stay on here for a few minutes and just see if we have any other questions. But other than that, I'd like to thank you, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Christine, if you're still on, it looks like we do have one final question here from Kathy.
Sure. I live in a rapidly growing horse community. Is there a resource to give people moving into a community that recommends amount of horses per acre when purchasing land? You can definitely create one. It's pretty easy. Just run a Google search on horse density. You'll find a lot of resources on it. I would say just be careful about how you word it. The county where I live, for example, they have a little brochure that they'll give out that talks about horse density requirements. But just a flat unit per acre, or I'm sorry, not unit, but horses per acre, that's not really going to account for the quality of your grazing land or necessarily your site layout or anything like that. So I would just caution, put something together. It would be a great thing to do, a great resource for your community, but just think about what kind of flexibility you might want to build into that horse density standard.